What happens when the most important day for your business actually turns out to be the worst day? Well, at Cisco Live, I sat down with Patrick Quirk, President and GM of Opengear, and together we unpacked what network resilience actually looks like, especially in a world increasingly dependent on digital infrastructure. So as thousands of tech leaders descended on the show floor, Opengear's booth stood out, offering answers to a question that many overlook. Until it's too late, what is your plan for when your network goes down? From out-of-bound management to zero-touch provisioning, Patrick walked me through how Opengear is helping businesses build networks that not only recover from outages, but also stay compliant, efficient and secure, and every single day. But it wasn't just a conversation about routers and switches. It was about rethinking how we build and manage the systems that power everything from retail transactions to AI workloads. So in an age where milliseconds matter and downtime can cost billions, how do you build a network that is truly ready for anything? And how do you achieve network resilience? Well, buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears directly onto the show floor at San Diego, at Cisco Live in San Diego. So thank you for joining me here on the show floor at Cisco Live. For everybody watching, can you tell them a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Patrick Quirk. I'm the president and GM of Opengear. And Opengear, what we have is essentially a network resilience platform. So, Cisco obviously is one of the largest network providers in the world, probably the biggest, right?
Yeah.
And, they're in pretty much every space of networking, routing, packet forwarding, you name it, right? They are the king. Well, when you deploy your networks out there, one of the things that you have to be able to do is manage your network. And so we provide the management tools, both the hardware to be able to connect in, as well as, software to be able to manage your fleet, and then give you insights down into not only the network switches, routers, but even the gear that's connected to them. So you get better insight over your entire fleet of deployed networked connected gear. So it's a resilience platform. We have a tagline that we use: first day, worst day, every day. And the idea is that even when you don't have a network, you can use Opengear to create your network. And so then on that first day, you've got all the information you need to be able to recover it on your worst day. So whether that's a cyber attack or, somebody, cuts your fiber, whatever happens, something that creates a network outage for you, we can be there to help you restore it. And then the everyday part is from a compliance, security, and other perspectives. We have all that data and, the insight into what's happening in your network on a day-to-day basis. So we can help you with your compliance regime, whether that's ISO 27001, SOC 2, any of the NIST 800 series, and, ensure that you have that proper information security management system in place.
And I've obviously flew in from the UK to come to the event today. Now, before I came here, there's a lot of big retailers struggling with network resiliency and cyber attacks. Marks and Spencer's is one very well-known one. They were down for several weeks.
Right.
Are you seeing attitudes change towards network resiliency? Because previously boardrooms were charged of not taking it seriously. That seems to be changing now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because where we operate is traditionally known as an out-of-band network, right? So the idea is that you've got your primary network that your data is running across, whether in the retail case, that's going to be your credit card transactions, those, connecting into the, your merchandise inventory and things of that nature, right? Well, if you've got all that in there and something happens to that primary interface and you're trying to manage your network through that primary interface, you're blocked out. So a denial of service attack, any kind of, CrowdStrike event that happened a year ago, that's a great example of, it obviously wasn't a cyber attack, but it had the same impact as a cyber attack or a denial of service would have had. So customers of ours who had Opengears on their networks were able to recover and get back up and running much more quickly than people who are using in-band networking. So that idea that out of band and that separate management network is a nice to have is changing to where people recognize that, having that network resilience is key to being able to, provide value for their customers.
And sticking with that network resiliency, there was an announcement from Cisco, some reports revealed there. What stood out to you from that report, some of the findings?
Yeah, so that was a really interesting one. So that came out, I think it was last week, they released the results of it. And the total dollar value of network outages globally last year, they estimated at $160 billion worth of cost. Wow. And so of the respondents to that survey, it was over 8,000 people participated, and 64% of them reported that they had had at least one outage during the year. So, if $160 billion worth of cost for network outages doesn't tell you that network resilience is important, I don't know what will, right?
Yeah, and I think traditionally the boardrooms they struggled to see the ROI of things like this, exactly, and something that might happen, not will happen. But I think attitudes are changing there. I mean, that's the ROI right there that you just mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. So, the history of it is, people kind of looked at it as, oh, this is the insurance policy for my insurance policy. Yeah. And, so it's definitely a secondary type thing. And so nice to have, whatever. But, if you look at the proliferation of AI that's going on right now, so the build out in data centers, the concentration of the network that's required inside of an AI cluster, how that cluster then connects to where it's collecting data from, people's queries into it from the inference side. And even as we're starting to see agentic AI being deployed, kind of at the network edge, that resilience of the network becomes that much more important as people begin to rely on these agents or these large language models in order to be able to run their business. So if the network goes down, your business stops. By definition, you need a resilient network. And that's why Opengear's here.
And obviously we're talking today live at your booth, right in the heart of the show floor. Prime real estate, may I say, as well. You've got a good position right here. What are the kind of questions?
Mostly because we're next to the coffee stand.
Yeah. But what kind of questions are people coming to the booth? What are they asking? What are they talking about?
Yeah. So the very first thing is, if somebody's new coming in, they almost always ask, well, what does a resilient network mean? How do what you provide, how is it any different than what I get out of my, kind of standard network gear? So that usually is question number one. The second thing that typically comes in is, well, tell us about, how I can do fleet management, because I've got thousands of switches deployed, so how can you possibly help me manage that entire fleet? So we have a platform called Lighthouse, and Lighthouse is essentially our fleet management. And then we've got some capabilities in the gear itself that when you go and deploy it, we can do it with full zero touch. So we have a module that we call the Lighthouse Service Protocol. And what it does is you deploy the product, it phones home, registers with Lighthouse, automatically locates itself, and then you can push your configuration down to it that then can drive the configuration of your entire network. So you can literally set up your network before you have a network.
Wow.
And so that's really resonating with people coming in. Look over our shoulder. That's kind of, where the whole messaging starts, and kind of work your way around the booth. And we've got some pretty interesting things as well. A couple of partners that we have in the booth this year, Packet Power from a sensor perspective. And then we have a partner from Europe, SVA, who have done some, integrated cabinet solutions that bring in some IoT and broaden around the Opengear solution in order to be able to provide that, kind of full scale solution for a retail customer or somebody with remote deployments. So it's pretty good stuff going on here.
And not only that, enticing anyone to your booth is going to need a certain amount of swag. What swag are you offering here?
We always have the swag. Everybody has it. No, we have, I don't know, I think we have something like 10,000 t-shirts or something. No, it's not that many. We have a lot of t-shirts that we're giving away. And then we do have the Lego Transformer. That's our raffle. So, come on by, and it's which one is it?
Oh, the Meta glasses.
Oh, all right. So, Legos, everybody's got to have your Legos, right? So, giving that away.
And what about any big announcements from you guys while you're here?
Yeah. So the single biggest thing that we announced for, kind of to coincide with Cisco Live is we announced a thing that we call foundation support. We announced it this morning. It'll be available, for quoting today, essentially, but live on the 20th of June. And what it is with a resilient, we are providing resilient network, right? And in order to do that, our customer journey isn't just on the first day. It's throughout the entire life cycle of the deployment of their network. And so we wanted to be able to stand up a support platform that gives our customers that reassurance with fixed SLAs, the ability to know that we are with them throughout the entire life cycle of their journey. So on day one, our products now ship with a 5-year hardware warranty. And in addition to the hardware warranty, we now have a companion support package, either foundation support or premium, that gives you either 8x5 or 24x7 support, along with fixed SLAs that move up between which of the two that you select. So it effectively is, kind of letting our customers know we're here on the journey with you throughout your entire life cycle deployment. And if you have a problem, you can call us up, we'll pick up the phone. We will help you through it.
And obviously, network resiliency is almost flirting with buzzword status. Are there any myths or misconceptions that you might hear or see that we can finally lay to rest today?
Yeah, that VLANs are enough, right? VLANs are not enough, right? So, it's having that observability platform so you know everything that's going on in your network. If, you don't have observability and you don't have resiliency, that ability to have a different path in to be able to manage and control and monitor your network, then you're running a risk. And business is about, risk mitigation as well as providing value for your customers. So having a resilient network and having Opengear as your partner, we help you de-risk it and we help you add value.
And from all the conversation you had here, there really seemed to be a awakening or an acknowledgement of that risk and taking it seriously now.
Absolutely. As we talked about earlier, that the study that came out from Cisco last week, $160 billion worth of cost from outages. We commissioned our own research study back earlier in the year. We announced it back in January, I believe it was, and, produced a couple of papers around it. And it was 500 CIOs and CSOs and 500 network engineers. And what we asked them was, are you utilizing AI in the management of your network? And if you are using AI, how are you using it? And the interesting thing was the different lenses that the C-suite had versus the network engineer. The network engineer is having to deal with the day-to-day grind. How am I doing all my patching updates? What am I doing to make sure that my network is up and alive? Whereas the C-suite is looking at it from the perspective of, how do I maintain compliance and how do I add additional value for my customers? And so getting the two sides of that equation inside of, the two cohorts inside of a company to recognize that you're really talking about the same thing. Right? Enabling your network engineers to be able to utilize tools to ensure that your network stays resilient does add value for your customers, and it helps you with your compliance regime. So, that holistic view of the network has to be resilient. You need more than just your basic network equipment to get by. And, we're here as a partner to help.
And if you take your own report that you did earlier this year, combined with the insights from the Cisco report, was there anything that surprised you because I think we see a lot of the similar kind of trends, and you're right in the heart of it, you're in the eye of the storm. Anything surprise you?
I mean, I would say that the biggest surprise was that people are talking about it. If we go back 2 years ago, it was even, just as recently as 2 years ago, kind of before the ChatGPT moment, if you will, right? Nobody was really talking about how AI was impacting networks, not just how AI can be used to help manage your network, but how AI was changing the behavior of data flowing through the network. I mean, if you go, put on the Wayback Machine, I'm an old dude, right? So, put on the Wayback Machine, the internet was built for data to flow down to the user, right? You make a query with your web browser and you get a bunch of data back at you. That equation has completely flipped around now with IoT and sensor data and machine-to-machine data. The internet is truly bidirectional now. And that change is, not every aspect of the network was built for that level of data transfer. And so as people are making these migrations, you look at the large telco providers and the amount of change that they've had inside of their networks over the last 3 to 5 years because of the advent of AI and the changing nature of the data that's flowing across the internet. It's that recognition, I think, that's kind of is what I would say is to me, not the most surprising thing, because I've been in the space, but I think anybody else reading these reports would come back and say, well, that's a surprising result, right?
And we are at a tech conference, and we have said AI, predictably. Looking to the future, anything that you see around that relationship with AI, its impact on network resiliency, both good and bad?
Yeah, so kind of the first is that you're starting to see networks fragment into different tiers, right? You've got that, that super high bandwidth tier inside of an AI cluster where nanoseconds matter, right? And then as you're moving outside of the core cluster, microseconds matter. As you then move into the interface into, anybody using their agentic AI or, their phone or whatever it happens to be, milliseconds matter for data criticality, right? You don't want to be in that smart city walking across the street, accidentally walking when the sign is red. You want it to recognize that you're out there, quickly switch it so that the driverless cars all stop on time, right? So that criticality of data is one of the most important things around the network. And so as you start seeing these tiers of data criticality, latency, and then the density of the data going across the network, that's really the biggest change that AI is going to bring about. And, just all the applications that are going to come along with it. I think the other thing I think that's going to happen is, people were surprised when, the DeepSeek announcement back in, I guess, early February is when it tanked the market and everything else. Anybody who was surprised wasn't paying attention. And, this is what happens, in an innovation cycle. Everybody was worried that AI was going to take over all the power generated by the sun or, that we could create on Earth, pick your metaphor, right? But if it can't happen, it won't. And it won't happen because, necessity is the mother of invention. And so you're going to see these big leaps as you're going through that innovation cycle. And I would expect that we're going to see some other shocking results coming out in the next year that kind of make everybody go, oh, wow, I didn't know it could do that. Right. And so, and all those things obviously impact the network. And that's why we're here to be your partner.
So for anybody listening to this podcast or visiting your booth, what's that key message that you want everybody to walk away with, especially when they're talking about network resiliency, maybe exploring the implications for themselves?
So the simple thing is networks need Opengear, and Opengear can do that, right? So, like I said right at the beginning, we are your network resilience platform. So, anybody who comes by the booth, what I want them to take away is, Opengear can do that. We're here to help you. We're here to partner. We're here to make sure that your network stays resilient.
And one of the best things about attending any conference is seeing all the different solutions, both in our area of expertise and outside of that as well. From your point of view, when you're not on this booth and you're having a little wander around, anything caught your attention? Anything excite you?
Yeah, there have been a few things. I think there was a big movement for like deep packet inspection back in the early 2000s was really when it started rolling around. And with the speeds on the networks now increasing, just the rate that those guys have been able to jump in and up their game and still be able to do, real live non-blocking packet inspection, that to me is pretty impressive. So there are a couple of companies here, that are doing that. So they're announcing 400 gigabit line rate, deep packet inspection. It's pretty impressive, right? So that would be one. I think, the second is just how software has become such a large part of what it means to be a network, right? So you look at pretty much everything that Cisco's doing, we've got the content corner here, the various stages on the other side, just that common theme of, AI and software now being an integral part of what happens on your network. I think that those are probably my two biggest takeaways from the show. I'm going to get around a little bit more this afternoon. And if you come back by, I'll tell you probably have a couple more for you. So,
and from the hundreds and thousands of people walking around, you must be hearing lots of different conversations. Are there any trends in the kind of conversations that people are having? It doesn't have to be on network resiliency, on anything, just the general vibe of conversations here.
The interesting thing about it is, there is a little bit of a dichotomy there, right? I mean, there are people that believe that, AI is, going to take over the world and all those kinds of things. And I overheard part of a conversation and joined in on it last night, actually. And it was around, is AI a tool or is it this autonomous, Skynet, right? And, there are definitely some Skynet-ish things that could possibly be done with AI, and people are rightly concerned about that. And, what are the governance rules going to be around it? But I think, it's just another tool in the toolkit, right? Ultimately, it's software, right? And our CTO, Doug Watkins, gave a talk earlier today, and he has a great analogy to what agentic AI is. And, if you go back, we've been training, agents as humans. We've been training agents for several millennia. So dogs are a great example, right? We have sheepdogs.
Yeah.
They were genetically bred to do one thing, and they know, gather the sheep, take them into the pen. But if you were to ask a bird dog to do the same thing, it couldn't. But if you asked the sheepdog to go get the bird, it would look up at you like you were crazy, right? And so if you think about it, that's really what we want agentic AI to be. It's just, kind of the software version or the silicon version of the trained, domesticated animals that we've had for a couple millennia. So I thought that was a really interesting discussion, and I think it's a good way to frame it.
Yeah, and I think it's a perfect moment to end our conversation today. But for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about today, find out more about Opengear, connect with you or your team, where would you like to point everyone?
Well, first of all, if you're here at Cisco Live, come by our booth. We got, a bunch of stations set up, a lot of SEs, engineers, as well as salespeople here to talk to you. Obviously, go to opengear.com. That's where we have all of our information up on the website. And, I'm sure that we've got podcasts dropping that people can listen to. Tech Talks Daily. I would recommend that they go there and, listen to your content and, hear about Opengear.
Well, there are a huge amount of people around this booth as we're talking today. So I appreciate how busy you are, but just thank you for stopping by. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think after exploring Opengear's approach to network resilience with Patrick today, it's clear that this conversation is long overdue in many boardrooms. From major retailers facing costly outages to the shifting data flows driven by AI. The stakes have never been higher. And Opengear's first day, worst day, every day philosophy, I think, brings clarity to a complex challenge. Because staying online isn't optional anymore, it's foundational. And whether it's remote provisioning, out-of-band recovery, or managing an entire fleet before the network even exists, they're helping IT teams stay ahead of the unexpected. And for anyone wondering how to make network resilience tangible, I think the 160 billion cost of outages last year is a compelling start. So a big thank you to Patrick for joining me during one of the busiest moments at Cisco Live and for sharing such sharp, actionable insights. But what steps will you take to ensure your network is ready for the next big test? Please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today. So thank you for listening as always. And I'll speak with you all again soon. Bye for now.